Writing. She was being rushed into an ambulance when she grabbed my hand and whispered, "Please don't leave me." The ambulance doors were already closing when she suddenly reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold, her face pale, and there was fear in her eyes that made the busy street around us seem to disappear. The paramedic was telling everyone to step back, but she held on as tightly as she could and whispered something that changed the course of both their lives. She didn't know where she was going, she didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she didn't want to face it alone. Daniel had never expected to become the kind of man who stopped for strangers. His life had become too complicated for that. At 34, he worked long hours at a financial company, wore expensive suits he didn't particularly care about, and measured his days by meetings, deadlines, and unanswered emails. He had once believed that success meant having control over everything. Then his younger sister had died after a sudden illness, and the belief had disappeared. Since that day, Daniel had become quieter, more distant, and strangely uncomfortable whenever someone needed him. That morning, he had been leaving the Halliday Hotel after an exhausting business meeting when he heard a commotion outside. A woman had collapsed near the entrance. People were gathering around her, but nobody seemed to know what to do. Daniel immediately ran toward her. The woman was conscious but barely. She was breathing rapidly, and one hand was pressed against her chest. An ambulance had already been called. Daniel crouched beside her, keeping his voice calm while the paramedics arrived. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He only knew that she was frightened. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, please like, comment, share this story, and subscribe to the channel. Sometimes the smallest decision to stop and help someone can become the most important moment of your life. The paramedics placed her on a stretcher and began moving her toward the ambulance. Daniel stepped back, assuming his part was finished. Then she grabbed his hand. Her eyes opened, and she looked directly at him. She whispered that she was scared and asked him not to leave. Daniel froze. Something about her voice reminded him of his sister's final days. Not the illness itself, but the fear of being alone. He remembered sitting beside his sister in a hospital room, promising that everything would be okay even when he had no idea whether it would be. So Daniel stayed. He followed the ambulance to the hospital and waited outside the emergency department. Hours passed before a doctor finally came out and explained that the woman, whose name was Emily, had suffered a serious medical episode. She was stable, but further tests were necessary. Daniel was relieved. Then the doctor asked whether he was family. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't. He was a stranger who had simply happened to be there. But when he entered Emily's room later, she smiled weakly and told him that she remembered his face from the street. She said everyone else had looked frightened, confused, or busy recording what was happening on their phones. He had looked at her like she was a person. That sentence stayed with him. Emily had no relatives nearby. Her parents lived in another state, and her closest friend was traveling overseas. She was terrified of what the doctors might discover, and even though she tried to hide it, Daniel could see the fear returning every time the hospital door opened. He visited again the next day. Then again. Not because he expected anything. Not because she had asked him to. He simply remembered what it felt like to be alone in a hospital room. As the days passed, Emily slowly recovered. The doctors discovered that her condition could be managed with treatment and regular care. It wasn't the end of her life, as she had feared during those first terrifying hours. But another problem remained. Emily had spent years believing that needing people was weakness. Daniel had spent years believing that caring about people was dangerous. They slowly challenged those beliefs in each other. Emily learned that accepting help didn't make her helpless. Daniel learned that staying close to someone didn't mean he would inevitably lose them. One evening, Daniel brought her a small paper bag from a bakery. Inside was a simple cinnamon roll. Emily laughed when she saw it. She explained that her mother used to make cinnamon rolls whenever someone in the family was sick. Daniel smiled and admitted that his sister had loved them too. For the first time, they talked about the people they had lost. Neither tried to offer perfect words. They simply listened. Weeks later, Emily was discharged. Daniel thought that would be the end of their strange friendship. Instead, she invited him to a small gathering with her friends. She wanted to thank him for staying that first night. Daniel almost refused. Then he remembered the promise he had made to himself after losing his sister. He would never again walk away simply because caring was frightening. So he went. That evening, surrounded by ordinary people eating ordinary food, Daniel realized how much his life had changed. He had spent years chasing success because he thought achievement could protect him from grief. But sitting there, listening to Emily laugh with her friends, he finally understood something his sister had once tried to teach him. Life wasn't valuable because it was perfectly controlled. It was valuable because it was shared. Months passed. Emily returned to work gradually. Daniel began volunteering at a hospital support program for families who had nobody nearby. Neither of them talked about the morning outside the hotel as something extraordinary anymore. But they never forgot it. One rainy afternoon, Daniel received a call from Emily. She told him she had just passed an important medical checkup. She was going to be okay. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Relief. Real, overwhelming relief. And he realized that his sister's death had taught him something painful, but Emily's survival had taught him something beautiful. Loving people did not guarantee that you would never lose them. But refusing to care guaranteed that you would miss many of life's most meaningful moments. Years later, Daniel still remembered the image of Emily being pushed toward that ambulance. He remembered the sunlight reflecting off the windows, the sound of traffic, the paramedic calling for space, and one frightened woman reaching for the hand of a complete stranger. She had thought she was asking him not to leave. In reality, she had reminded him not to leave himself behind. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe for more stories about kindness, courage, and unexpected second chances. And before the final line, I have one special request. Comment, nobody should face fear alone, if you believe one act of kindness can change 2 lives at once. Daniel thought he had stopped that morning to help a stranger. He never realized that while he was holding her hand, she was helping him find his way back to the part of himself he had lost years ago. Sometimes, the person you save is not the only person who gets a second chance.